One of the key reasons security awareness programs fail is not a lack of evidence, it's a lack of traction. You can have the data, the research, the simulation results, every case study you could want, and still watch it go nowhere. I was browsing Reddit recently and saw a post that I couldn't let go of. It was about a doctor in the 1840s and what he went through, the resistance he hit, the mistakes he made. It's as relevant to what you and I do today as anything I've seen published in years. In 1847, women in Vienna were giving birth in the street, not because they had no choice, because they did have a choice, and they made it. The first clinic at Vienna General Hospital, well, it had a reputation, the kind that never appears in official records, but travels fast anyway. So women weighed their odds and chose the pavement over the ward. And they were right to. The mortality rate in that clinic was up to 5 times higher than the one next door. A doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis had proved it. He knew what was causing it, and he knew how to stop it. But it would take almost 20 years for anyone in power to act on what he knew. This today is a story about evidence. It's about stubbornness and about the gap between being right and being heard. Welcome to the Awareness Practitioners. In this episode, we're going to talk about why being right is never enough and what to do about it. But a note before we continue. This episode deals with maternal death. It matters to the story, but I just wanted to flag it before we start. Ignaz Semmelweis was a Hungarian physician working in Vienna in the 1840s. Not famous, not senior, an assistant at the first obstetrical clinic of Vienna General Hospital, teaching students and delivering babies. And what he noticed almost straight away was a gap that made no sense. The clinic where he worked was a place where mothers were dying, around 1 in 10. In bad years, far worse. In 1842, the rate hit nearly 16%. Almost 1 in 6 women who walked into that clinic didn't walk out. The second clinic in the same building, treating the same women, recorded less than 4%, some years closer to 2%. That's not a marginal difference. That's not noisy data. That's a place of safety and a place of danger, side by side, under one roof for years. And the women knew, but not from journals, not from doctors, from each other. Word travelled the way it always does when an institution is failing the people inside it, quietly and accurately. Some of them did the maths and made a decision that tells you everything. They gave birth in the street, on purpose, timing it so it looked like the baby had come on the way in. No doctor, no equipment, no help. And for women who had already almost had nothing, that was still the safer bet. The doctors found this baffling, a little embarrassing even. What they didn't do was ask what it was telling them. Well, Semmelweis asked. He started hunting for the difference between the two clinics. Not what they shared, but what set them apart. Something that could explain a 5-fold gap in the dying. He ruled out overcrowding. The second clinic was actually busier. He ruled out the climate. It was the same building, the same air, a corridor, just a corridor between them. He wondered if the priest doing his rounds was frightening the women into illness. He even changed the position women gave birth in to see if it moved the numbers, but nothing explained it. He was lost. And all this time, while he was lost, mothers kept dying. And then something happened that had nothing to do with the maternity ward. His colleague Jakob Kalecka was supervising a post-mortem when a student's scalpel slipped and cut his finger. It was a small wound, the kind that you wouldn't think about. But within days, Kolechka was dead. Semmelweis read the autopsy report, and there it was, the same devastation inside his friend's body that he'd been seeing in the women in the first clinic, in a man who'd never been near it. Kolechka had not died of childbed fever, but he had died of the same thing, and the only link between him and the mothers was the cut. Something had gotten into his blood from the body on that table. And here's what makes it remarkable. Germ theory, it didn't exist yet. Nobody knew that invisible organisms cause disease. The science was 20 years away. So Semmelweis had no word for what he was looking at. He couldn't name it, couldn't see it, and couldn't actually prove what it was. But he could see what it did, and he could see how it moved. The doctors and students in his clinic spent their morning performing autopsies, and then they'd walk down the corridor and deliver babies. The same hands. They were carrying something off the dead and putting it straight into the living women. The midwives in the second clinic, they never touched a corpse, and their patients lived. So this story is basically taking time to say something, but let me say it. The thing nobody would say in that hospital out loud, the doctors, they weren't washing their hands. That was it. They went from the dead to the living and didn't wash their hands. Not because they were careless, but because no one had ever told them that they had to. And the idea that their hands were dirty was unthinkable. It wasn't the air. It wasn't the crowding. It wasn't the priest. It was the doctors. So Semmelweis acted on what he knew. In May 1847, he brought in one rule. Before touching any patient, you wash your hands in a chlorinated lime solution, not soap, not water, something strong enough to scrub off whatever they were carrying from that autopsy room. And the results came fast. April, the month before the rule, mortality was at 18%. By June, it was just over 2%. And by July, just over 1%. And in 2 of the months that followed, for the first time anybody could remember, it hit 0. 0. Put that in terms that we live with. If your phishing click rate fell from 18% to nothing in 3 months, you'd build a case study around it. You would take it to your board. You'd write it up for every publication that would have it. That's a career-defining result. And Semmelweis had that result. It was sitting in the records month after month, impossible to argue with. And the establishment looked at it and they looked away. His boss, Professor Klein, was unmoved. The wider medical world was hostile. Some said that he'd not said anything new. Others repeated his work secondhand and got it wrong. And some doctors were simply offended by the suggestion that they should wash at all. The idea that their hands might be unclean didn't fit with who they believed they were. They were gentlemen. Sit with that a second. Mothers dying at 18%. The fix was a wash and 5 minutes. And part of what stood in the way was the fact that the people who needed to change felt it was beneath them. Think about the last time you tried to move someone off click and next training, the training that passes the audit but doesn't actually change anything. The kind people click through with one eye on the clock because somewhere it was decided that a green tick was good enough. You had the evidence it wasn't working. You had something better to offer. And someone senior, someone with years behind them, looked at you and said, "We've always done it that way and we've never had a problem." Well, Semmelweis had that evidence. He had the data. He'd watched people stop dying and none of it was enough. And he had no idea what to do about that. Now, this is where it gets complicated, but it's also where it gets useful. He didn't take it quietly. How could he? He'd watched the dying stop and then watched people shrug. So he started writing, not careful papers, built to win skeptics over, but open letters, furious ones. The most powerful obstetricians in Europe. He called them irresponsible. He called them ignorant. He called them murderers. He demanded that they convert. Think about what that did to him. Every letter made it easier to talk about Semmelweis instead of his findings. He handed his critics an exit. Instead of facing data that they couldn't refute, they could shake their heads at the angry man and move on. The conversation he quietly changed from "is he right" to "is he well?" And once that happens, the evidence doesn't matter anymore. He began with the numbers on his side, and he ended in an asylum committed by his own colleagues, beaten by the guards, and dead 2 weeks later at 47. The cause of death was infection, the very thing he'd spent his life trying to stop. He was right about all of it, and he's still lost. Now, that Reddit post that I mentioned, it was just a summary. The 2 clinics, the hand washing, the rejection, the death. The kind of thing that gets shared on Reddit because the injustice of it is almost too hard to take. But the comments were the interesting part, not what people said about Semmelweis, but what they said to each other. Within a few replies, it had turned into an argument about which country is worst at resisting new ideas. One nation, then another, then history, then politics. Person after person reading a story about people protecting their beliefs at any cost and immediately doing the same thing, pointing outwards, looking anywhere but in. Not one of them thought that they were the doctor who needed to wash their hands, and neither did the doctors. There's a name for this now, the Semmelweis reflex, the instinct to reject new information because it contradicts with what we already believe. And it's not a quirk of history. It's not something that happened once in Vienna and stopped. It's the standard human response to inconvenient evidence. It was there in that comment thread, and it's probably in your organization right now. Semmelweis couldn't see it in himself. And that's what made him so easy to dismiss. The practitioners who change things over the long run are the ones who learn to spot it in the room, in the people they're trying to reach, and in themselves. So what do you actually do with this? Start by being honest about who you're dealing with. Not a villain, not a fool, usually someone good at their job with 20 or 30 years behind them, whose judgment has been right often enough that they've earned the right to trust it. The doctors who ignored Semmelweis were the same. They weren't stupid. They were working inside a picture of the world that made complete sense to them. And he was asking them to tear it up. That is the situation. Now, here is what he got wrong, and here's what you can do instead. 4 things. 1, he never asked what they already believed. He arrived with proof and expected the proof to do the work, and it never does. The findings that land aren't the ones that arrive as a challenge. They're the ones that arrive as confirmation of something that the person already half suspected. So before you walk in, work out what they already think, and then frame your finding as proof they were right, not proof they were wrong. 2, he never tied it to anything they cared about. He led with his obsession, not their problem. You've got more to work with. The risk they have already named, the number their own boss is leaning on them about, the thing keeping them up at night. Attach your finding to that, and you'll stop being a threat to their judgment and start being the answer to their problem. 3, he had allies and he stopped using them. A respected journal editor compared his discovery to the smallpox vaccine. He had people who got it and would say so in public. But as he got angrier, he turned away from them and tried to win alone. You won't win this alone either. Find the people who already get it, the ones with the ear of the person you're trying to move, and let them carry it in with you. That's not a compromise. That's how change happens. And 4, he let frustration become the story. He went from the best data in European medicine to writing letters calling people murderers. The moment he did that, the conversation stopped being about his evidence and started being about him. This is the one to watch in yourself. The second you get loud, you hand people something easier to argue with than your data. I've been there, I've done it. Stay calm, and you stay hard to dismiss. That's it. Understand who they are. Frame it as a conversation. Tie it to what they care about. Bring allies and keep your cool. None of that means backing down. Semmelweis, he was right. And he was right to keep going. Persistence is one of the best things you have. But persistence on its own wasn't enough to save him. And it won't be enough for you. Persistence without a strategy is just noise. Because this was never really about being right. You probably already know you're right. It's about the people you're protecting. The ones clicking through training and learning nothing. The ones ignoring a policy nobody made matter to them. The ones clicking the link because no one ever really gave them a reason to stop. They need you to be heard, not just right, but heard. Semmelweis was right, and it wasn't enough. Don't make his mistake.